Okay, so let's dive into something that I think a lot of people kind of get the heebie-jeebies about, but is massively important for your career. And that's salary negotiation.
Right.
You hear it all the time, like, you got to negotiate your salary. But did you know that not negotiating could actually cost you over $1 million
Wow.
over your entire career?
That's a huge number.
Yeah. So we're going to break down some strategies today to make sure that you are getting paid what you are worth.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that it's not all about just the money.
Right.
Like, negotiating is a really valuable skill that can come in handy in pretty much every area of life.
That's so true.
If you think about it, like whether you are, haggling for a better price on something like a car, or asking for more flexibility in your work schedule, or even just figuring out dinner plans with friends.
Yeah.
It's all negotiation.
Right. It's knowing your worth and advocating for yourself.
Yeah,
And that's really powerful stuff.
totally.
So let's break down the steps to becoming a master negotiator.
Okay.
Now, I know you've probably heard about researching salaries online, like using websites like Glassdoor and PayScale.
Of course.
But let's go a little bit deeper than that.
Yeah.
What are some less-known strategies that people can use?
So one thing I would recommend is looking into the financial health of the company.
Okay.
If it's a publicly traded company, they release financial reports.
Right.
And if you can kind of get a sense of how profitable they are, that can give you some leverage when you're negotiating.
Interesting.
If they're doing well, you can make a stronger case for why you deserve a higher salary.
It's like having that insider knowledge, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've done our research and we have a good understanding of the market rate. So what's next? How do we actually highlight our value to the company without sounding like we're just bragging?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's important to think about it less as bragging and more about framing your achievements in terms of the employer's goals.
Okay.
So instead of just saying, I improved efficiency, quantify it, give them numbers.
Okay.
For example, you could say, I reduced production time by 15%, which saved the company X amount of dollars annually.
I like that.
Numbers speak volumes, and they really demonstrate the tangible impact you've had.
To make it real, yeah.
Exactly.
But I got to say, I've always struggled with quantifying my soft skills.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what about those of us who don't necessarily work with hard numbers all the time?
That's a good point. So for soft skills, I would focus on the outcomes you've achieved that demonstrate those skills.
Okay.
So for example, let's say you're really great at communication and collaboration.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying that, you could talk about how you successfully led a cross-functional team to launch a new product on a really tight deadline.
Okay.
You're still quantifying your impact by emphasizing that successful completion of the project.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've done our research. We've quantified our achievements.
Right.
Now it's time to practice our pitch.
Yes.
This is the part that I think makes a lot of people nervous.
True.
What are your tips for feeling confident and prepared going into a negotiation?
I think the most important thing is to practice your pitch.
Okay.
Practice it out loud in front of a mirror or with a friend until it feels really natural and you're comfortable with the flow.
Yeah.
That will help you identify any areas where you might stumble or feel unsure.
It's like anything else. The more you practice, the better you get. Right?
Exactly.
But I also think it's important to be ready for any unexpected questions or pushback that you might get during the negotiation.
Right.
How can we anticipate potential objections and have responses ready?
Yeah, I think that's really smart to think about in advance.
Yeah.
So think about common objections like budget constraints or concerns about your experience level, and prepare thoughtful responses that address those concerns directly.
Okay.
For instance, if they say the budget is tight, you could emphasize the return on investment the company will get by hiring you.
Right.
Highlight your skills and how they'll contribute to the company's bottom line.
That makes sense. Okay. So we've researched, we've quantified our achievements, we've practiced. I think the next step can be a little tricky. It's about aiming high while staying realistic in our ask.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with that?
So this is where your research comes in again.
Okay.
You want to have a really good understanding of the typical salary range for your position and your experience level.
Right.
And you want to start with a target salary that's a little bit higher than your absolute minimum.
Yeah.
But still within a reasonable range based on what you found.
So we're not just throwing out a random number.
Yeah. No.
We're strategically choosing a target that gives us some wiggle room to negotiate.
Right.
Okay. But how high is too high?
Yeah.
I don't want to seem unrealistic or offend the hiring manager.
It's a balancing act for sure. It's good to be ambitious,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also important to be grounded in reality.
Yeah.
If you start with a number that's way outside the typical range, it could hurt your credibility.
Right.
So you want to find that sweet spot.
Okay, so we've aimed high, but stayed realistic.
Right.
Now comes the part that I think makes a lot of people uncomfortable,
Oh.
and that is being ready to walk away from an offer.
Yeah.
And I feel like this could be misinterpreted as being aggressive or difficult, but it's not about that, is it?
No, not at all. I think it's about knowing your worth and setting really clear boundaries for yourself.
Okay.
So think about, what are your non-negotiables?
Right.
Is it salary? Is it benefits? Is it work-life balance?
Mm-hmm.
Having a clear understanding of your bottom line will empower you to politely decline an offer that doesn't align with what you deserve.
I love that reframing.
Yeah.
It's not about being difficult. It's about knowing your value and what you're willing to accept.
Right.
Okay, so let's say we've gone through all of these steps,
Mhm.
and it's finally time for the actual negotiation.
Okay.
I'm just picturing myself sitting across the table from the hiring manager, feeling all sweaty and nervous.
I can imagine.
Any tips for staying calm and collected in the moment?
Yeah. I think it's helpful to remember that negotiation is a conversation.
Okay.
It's not a battle.
Right.
You want to go in with a collaborative mindset and focus on finding an agreement that works for both sides.
Okay.
And remember all that preparation you did.
Yeah.
That's your secret weapon, you know?
Okay.
Trust in your research, your quantified achievements, your practice pitch.
Yeah.
That confidence will really shine through.
I love that it's so easy to get caught up in those nerves,
Mm-hmm.
but reminding myself that it's just a conversation, it can really help ease that pressure.
For sure.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already. We talked about research, highlighting our value, practicing our pitch, aiming high, and being ready to walk away.
Yes.
But I think it's really helpful to see how all of these pieces come together in a real-life situation.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about Alex, a talented graphic designer who was offered a job he was super excited about.
Okay.
He'd done all the right things.
Mm-hmm.
He had researched the company. He scoped out salaries for similar roles.
Yeah.
He put together this amazing portfolio.
Sounds great.
But when he actually got the offer, it just felt low.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So Alex found himself in a position I think a lot of our listeners can relate to.
Right.
Super excited about the opportunity, but knowing that the salary just didn't quite match his skills or the value he could bring to the company,
Yeah.
this is where all that prep work we talked about really pays off.
So Alex is facing this tough decision.
Mm-hmm.
What did he do? Did he just accept the offer, or did he try to negotiate?
He decided to negotiate.
Good for him.
And he used a really smart approach. Instead of just focusing on the number, he reminded himself that this was a conversation.
Okay.
His goal was to demonstrate in a very specific way how his unique skills could help the company succeed.
I like that it's not just about what he wants.
Right.
It's about aligning his goals with the company's goals.
Exactly.
So how did he go about doing that?
Well, he started by gathering concrete examples of his accomplishments, especially the ones that really aligned with the needs of this new company.
Okay.
And remember how we talked about quantifying your impact?
Yes.
Alex took that to heart. He didn't just say, I'm good at designing websites.
Uh-huh.
He pointed to a specific project where his design choices led to a 25% increase in website traffic for a previous client.
Oh, wow.
You know?
That's a great example.
Yeah.
It takes it beyond just words and shows them the actual results
Exactly. It makes it real for them.
that you can deliver.
Right.
I love that. And he didn't stop there, right?
He didn't stop there.
What else did he do?
He also went the extra mile and created a mini portfolio
Oh, wow.
that was specifically tailored to this new company.
Right.
And he included mock-ups of how he would approach some of their design challenges,
Wow.
showing that he had really thought about their brand and their target audience.
That is seriously impressive.
Yeah.
It sounds like he was so prepared going into this negotiation. But I'm curious, how did he actually handle the conversation itself? Was he super nervous?
I mean, he was a little nervous, which is totally normal,
Right.
but because he had practiced his pitch beforehand,
Yes.
he was able to walk in feeling confident and ready to articulate his points clearly.
Okay.
And he didn't just focus on the salary number. He started by genuinely expressing his enthusiasm for the role and the company.
I bet that made a big difference.
Yeah, I think so.
It's easy to forget that it is a two-way conversation.
Mm,
And building that rapport can go a long way.
absolutely. So by establishing that positive connection,
Yeah.
Alex really set the stage for a more collaborative discussion.
Okay.
And then he presented his target salary, which was higher than their initial offer,
Go.
but still within the reasonable range based on his research.
So he made his ask. What happened next?
Well, they acknowledged his skills and the value that he could bring,
Hmm.
but they did express some initial hesitation about the salary request.
Okay, so this is where it would have been easy for him to get flustered.
Right.
But because he had anticipated this,
Yes,
he was able to stay calm and address their concerns head on.
exactly. This is where all that preparation we talked about really comes
It
in.
all comes together.
Yeah.
So instead of getting defensive, what did he do?
He reiterated his key points,
Okay.
and he emphasized the unique skills and experience that he brought to the table
Yeah.
that really went above and beyond the basic requirements of the job description.
So he stood his ground,
Yeah.
but did it in a way that was collaborative and focused on mutual benefit.
Exactly.
Did it work?
It did. The hiring manager was really impressed by his thoughtful response and his willingness to engage in a constructive dialogue.
Good.
They went back and forth a bit,
Uh-huh.
and ultimately the hiring manager came back with a revised offer that was significantly closer to Alex's target.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
It sounds like he really nailed the negotiation.
he did.
But I'm guessing it wasn't just about the salary, though, right?
You're right.
Were there other things in the offer
Oh,
that he considered?
Yeah, Alex was also strategic about being flexible on other aspects of the compensation package.
Okay.
So he expressed a willingness to negotiate on things like vacation time or professional development opportunity.
I see.
Showing that he was approaching this from a collaborative perspective.
That's such a good point. It reminds us that negotiation isn't always about getting everything we want,
Right?
but finding a solution that works for both sides.
Exactly.
So what happened in the end? Did Alex accept the revised offer?
He did. After careful consideration, he felt that the new offer really reflected his worth and aligned with his career goals.
Awesome.
So he successfully negotiated a salary he was happy with.
That's great.
But even more importantly, he gained valuable experience and a boost of confidence that he can carry with him throughout his career.
Alex's story is such a great example of how these 5 steps can work in real life. It highlights the power of research preparation, confidence, and a willingness to advocate for yourself in a really professional and respectful way.
Absolutely. And it's also a good reminder that negotiation is a skill that you hone over time.
Oh.
The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become with these conversations.
That makes sense.
And remember, even if you don't get everything you ask for in a particular negotiation, the experience itself is so valuable.
Right.
It teaches you how to articulate your worth, handle challenging conversations, and advocate for yourself effectively.
Those are all such important skills to have, not just in our careers, but just in life in general.
I completely agree.
It's like building a muscle. The more we flex our negotiation skills, the stronger they become.
Yeah.
Hearing Alex's story makes me wonder, are there any negotiation blunders that you've seen people make? Like, what are some common pitfalls to avoid?
One common mistake I see is people going into a negotiation without a really clear understanding of their worth. One common mistake I see is people going into a negotiation without a really clear understanding of their worth.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Sometimes we can be our own worst enemies when it comes to advocating for ourselves.
Right, and that's why that research phase is so crucial. It gives you that knowledge you need to confidently state your value.
Okay.
Another mistake I see is not practicing your pitch beforehand.
Okay.
You don't want to sound like a robot,
Right.
but having a general idea of what you want to say and how you want to frame your accomplishments can make a huge difference in how you come across.
It's like having a mental roadmap for the conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of roadmaps, are there any other resources that you recommend for listeners who want to dive even deeper into the art of negotiation?
There are some fantastic books out there
Yeah.
that offer really in-depth insights into negotiation strategies.
Okay.
One that I always recommend is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
He's a former FBI hostage negotiator,
Oh, wow.
so he knows a thing or two about high-stakes situations.
I bet.
The book is full of really practical tips on how to build rapport influence outcomes and navigate those challenging conversations.
Sounds like it applies to a lot more than just salary negotiations.
It really does.
Okay.
Another one I recommend is Ask for It by Linda Babcock and Sarah Lashover.
Okay.
And they focus specifically on the gender gap in negotiation
Oh, interesting.
and offer strategies for women to overcome the societal barriers that often prevent them from asking for what they deserve.
I love that.
It's a really empowering read.
That's so important because it's not always a level playing field when it comes to negotiation.
Right.
So having those resources could be real game changers.
Yeah, for sure.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into salary negotiation, what's the key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is to remember that you have value.
Yes.
And you deserve to be compensated fairly for your work and your skills.
Right.
Don't be afraid to ask for what you're worth.
Yeah.
And don't get discouraged if it takes time to get there.
Mm.
Negotiation is a process.
Okay.
And every experience, even the tough ones, help you grow and refine those skills.
That's a great point to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into salary negotiation.
My pleasure.
We hope you walk away feeling empowered and ready to take control of your earning potential.
One common mistake I see is people going into a negotiation without a really clear understanding of their worth.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a job offer and undervalue yourself,
Right.
especially if you're, eager to please.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Sometimes we can be our own worst enemies when it comes to advocating for ourselves.
Exactly. And that's why that research phase is so crucial.
Yeah.
It arms you with the knowledge you need to confidently state your value.
Right.
Another mistake I see is not practicing your pitch beforehand.
Okay.
You don't want to sound like a robot,
Right.
but having at least a general idea of what you want to say and how you want to frame your accomplishments
Okay.
can make a huge difference in how you come across.
Yeah. It's like having that mental roadmap for the conversation.
Exactly.
Speaking of roadmaps, are there any other resources that you recommend for listeners who want to kind of go even deeper into the art of negotiation?
Yeah, there are some fantastic books out there
Huh?
that offer really in-depth insights into negotiation strategies.
Cool.
One that I always recommend is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
He's a former FBI hostage negotiator,
Wow.
so he knows a thing or two about high-stakes situations.
That's awesome.
The book is full of practical tips
Yeah.
on how to build rapport-influence outcomes and navigate those challenging conversations.
It sounds like it applies to a lot more than just salary negotiations.
It does. It really does.
Awesome.
Another one I recommend is Ask for It by Linda Babcock and Sarah Lashover.
Okay.
And they focus specifically on the gender gap in negotiation
Interesting.
and offer strategies for women to overcome the societal barriers that often prevent them from asking for what they deserve.
I love that.
Yeah, it's an incredibly empowering read.
That's so important because it's not always a level playing field
Right.
when it comes to negotiation. So having those resources can be huge.
Sure.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into salary negotiation, what's the key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is to remember that you have value.
Yeah.
And you deserve to be compensated fairly for your work and for your skills. Don't be afraid to ask for what you're worth.
Right.
And don't get discouraged if it takes time to get there.
Yeah.
Negotiation is a process, and every experience, even the tough ones,
Yeah.
helps you grow and refine those skills.
That's such a great point to end on.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into salary negotiation.
It was my pleasure.
We hope you walk away feeling empowered and ready to take control of your earning potential.